So we just finished the rational graphs. Now we're going to do the rational equations. This is usually familiar territory because it's solving. Find X, like what's the answer? So solving is typically people like that. It's like, oh, familiar territory, just get X by itself. So there's two methods when you have the rational equations, because what you want to do is get rid of the fractions. You want to make the fractions go away. So the first method is cross multiply. The thing is that only works if you have one fraction equal to one fraction. A single fraction equals sign a single fraction. If it's any more complicated than that, you can't cross multiply. Like if there's another term in there, then that's not going to work. So if you can cross multiply, but if not, what you're going to do is multiply by the common denominator to every term. And what that does is it cancels out all the fractions. Like what's the goal with that? Well, it makes all the fractions go away. That's the point. Right? And the only other thing I'm going to add to that is you need to make sure that you check your answers. That doesn't involve any more writing. There's nothing I need for you to write down for that, but mentally you need to check them, because if you get an answer that is one of your troublemakers, like say you get X equals 7 and 7 was a troublemaker, you have to kick them out. That cannot be your answer. You can't divide by what number? 0. Can't divide by 0. So look at number 1. Let's decide who the troublemakers would be. You have 2 of them. Look at the denominators. Who would your troublemakers be? -7, -3. Some people like to write that off to the side. X cannot be -7. X cannot be -3. That's an opinion though. If you're like, I don't want to do that, fine. I'm just showing you some people like to do that. Like, hey, if I get one of those answers, I've got to kick it out. Now this one we can cross multiply. Do you see how it's one fraction equals one fraction? So we're going to cross this way, cross this way. Believe it or not, when cross multiplying, the most common mistake is that people lose the equal sign. Just don't lose your equal sign or it's not an equation anymore. So you're going to have X plus 2, and you need to give that a hug, times X plus 3. That's crossing this way, equals sign. And then cross the other way, it would be 5 times X plus 7. And what that did is it made the fractions go away. I don't have any more fractions. Now, we would need to multiply this all together. So multiplying this together, what are we going to get? X squared, good. Good. Why is it 5x? 2x and 3x. 2 plus 3 is 5. Plus 2 times 3 is 6. Perfect. Equals, and then over here, you're just going to distribute the 5. So 5x plus 35. This is a little bit of writing, but a lot of people kind of like this topic because it's like, oh, just algebra. I can do that. It's like very algebra heavy. I call this next step evacuate. If you have a square, you're probably going to need to evacuate. Get it all to one side so that it all equals 0. So we're going to subtract the 5x, subtract the 35. And do you see how I lined them up? Mathematics, and I do this pep talk a lot for my 9th graders, but it bears repeating here too. It's more about staying organized than being smart. You know, like intelligence is great, but it's really more about staying organized and not just writing your numbers, you know, wherever. All right, so that's going to give us what? X squared, and then, oh, that's kind of convenient. What happens there? Yeah, those cancel. 6 minus 35 be negative, what is that, 29? Equals 0. So actually, I didn't realize those were going to cancel. You know, my telepathy is malfunctioning, right? So we actually don't need to factor that. We can go ahead and just get the X by itself. So I'm going to add the 29 over. And then what would you do to get X all alone? All right, square root. When you put a square root, you also have to put plus minus. So plus minus, square root of 29 without a calculator is just square root of 29. That doesn't split. And so you got 2 answers, and those are your 2 answers. We did not get either of these troublemakers, so we're good. You just want to like mentally check that. You don't have to write anything else down. You just need to check it. All right, so look at this one. You could cross multiply, but actually threw this on here to show you there's like, you can actually sort of bypass almost this entire problem. What do you notice about this one? Yeah, the denominators are the same, so you can actually just, yeah, do the numerators. So you can just do X minus 1 equals 2. I'm totally fine with that. To me, that is not being lazy. That's being efficient. You want to be as efficient as possible. All right, and then so you would add 1, x equals 3. Check it though. Do you get to keep that or do you have to get rid of it? Who would your troublemaker be if you had this denominator equals 0? -1/2. We did not get -1/2, so we're good. So again, the checking is a thing that just happens mentally. You're not going to like see that written on the paper, but you just need to mentally check them. So that was cross multiply, or you can kind of just skip the whole problem. What's that? You don't want to share with the class? No, okay. So do you see how this one and all the rest of them are going to be like this? How it's not just a single fraction equals a single fraction? See how it's 3 totally separate things? Okay, so you have to decide what your common denominator is. This is different from a greatest common factor.